that selects, mentors, and accelerates the best high-impact entrepreneurs in the region, supporting them to scale their companies and multiply their personal impact for the benefit of the local ecosystems and the wider economy. Since Endeavor launched in Nigeria in 2018, it has selected and supported 14 entrepreneurs leading 9 high-growth companies. Some of you might have joined our previous webinars in the Think Big series. These webinars are a series that we're putting together to support entrepreneurs and give them access to information to help them in their decision-making through the current crisis. I'm grateful and excited today to have Tayo Oviosu with us. He's been an Endeavor entrepreneur since 2018, and he's the founder and group CEO of Paga. Paga is a mobile payment company building an ecosystem to enable people digitally send money and receive money, as well as creating simple financial access for everyone. Paga is the leading mobile money service in Nigeria, which is its first market. In 2014, CNBC selected Tayo as the Entrepreneur of the Year, West Africa. And in 2015, the African Leadership Network selected Paga as the Outstanding Growing Company of the Year. He's also a member of the Young Presidents Organization, YPO. Tayo has a passion to help entrepreneurs bring ideas to life and build scalable businesses, is an active angel investor and co-founder of the Kairos Angel, an angel investment club. Tayo earned his undergraduate degree from the University of Southern California and his MBA from Stanford University. Today's session is titled Building a Resilient Business. Tayo will share, based on his over a decade experience as an entrepreneur, how to lead a scalable company and build resilience into your business. He will share journey stories and lessons learned along the way. He would also be providing answers to some of the questions some of the attendees had sent in as he goes through his presentation. He will speak for about 30 minutes. While he's speaking, please drop your questions in the Q&A box. And you also have the opportunity, some of you, to ask your questions directly to Tayo in the Q&A segment. So I will now hand over to Tayo and let him kick off the webinar.
Nika, thank you very much. And thank you to Endeavor for having me here today. And to all of you for attending. I'm really grateful to be here and honored. I'm looking forward to this and sharing just a few thoughts and my lessons around building a resilient business. I'm sure there are going to be a lot of questions, and some of them I'm not able to answer. You can always reach me. Those of you who follow me know I'm on Twitter at Oviosu, but also feel free to drop me an email, tayo@paga.com. A lot of questions are very, very specific and maybe hard to answer in this session, but I'm very open and available to answer questions afterwards. So we'll just get right into it. I think Nika has already given my bio, so I'm not going to go through that. I guess maybe the only thing I'll just say is, I came back to Nigeria in 2009, really just out of a very strong desire to do something entrepreneurial and to be part of the redevelopment of Nigeria. And I was in private equity before coming into entrepreneurship. And I did join a private equity firm in Nigeria, did that for about 3 months before I started, for about 6 months, before I started looking at different ideas to set up my own business. And then eventually the Paga journey started. And I'll share a few thoughts around that, but we started the business in 2009 and in August of 2012 launched to the public. So it's been about 7.5 years to the public. And for 3 years, we're working hard, applying for the license, but working daily very hard on getting the product going. So before I go on, I just thought to share what is my favorite definition of entrepreneurship. And this is a definition from Irv Grousbeck. It says, the pursuit of opportunity without regard for the resources currently controlled. And I love this particular definition because you can be an entrepreneur even within a business, and you don't have to start a business to be an entrepreneur, a business on your own to be an entrepreneur. Today, within my company, we have groups of entrepreneurs starting different businesses within our company, and so I really say this from the perspective that everything I'm about to share is not. Don't think of it from the perspective of just starting your own business. If you're working somewhere today, that is very fine, and these principles also apply. And not everybody is going to be Mark Zuckerberg. In fact, the most successful entrepreneurs start their businesses in their mid-40s. Now, I didn't do that, but that's the reality. And the reason why we hear only a very few Mark Zuckerbergs is because there are very few of Mark Zuckerbergs. Most of us have to, go and build our skills and learn somewhere else before we get going. So I just wanted to use this as a backdrop. But today, what I'm just going to do is, I think there are 5 areas. As I was thinking about this topic, I think there are 5 key areas that I just bring it down to that I think you need to focus on if you are thinking about how do I build a resilient business. And I think underlying all of it, though, is realizing that it's a marathon and not a sprint. And you need to just be ready for a long haul around this. First, seek change to make change happen. I'll just go over them and then I'll go into each one of them. Team, right? You're as good as your team. Your investors as partners. For most companies, you have to raise capital. If you don't, that's great. But if you do, then your investors as partners. Product market fit. We'll talk about that and what does that mean. And the last one is alignment of your team. So it's one thing to have the team, but another thing to know that we're all working towards the same purpose and we all understand what the other person is doing, why they're doing it, and how it aligns with what we're all supposed to do. So I think these are the 5 areas that you have to focus on, and I'll dig into each one of them now. And so the first one, in terms of seeking to make change happen, I'm reminded of a quote from Seth Godin. If you don't know Seth Godin, please check him online. He's one of the smartest marketing minds I've ever come across. And he said this at an event that I hosted here in Nigeria. He said, you seek to make change happen. If you're not making change happen, stop and do something else. And really that's what entrepreneurship is about. You see a problem and you want to change it. And so if you're not doing that, then what are you doing? So any business, before you even think about being resilient, has to be in the business of change. Otherwise, why don't we just do things the way we're doing things before, right? And that's really something to think about when you're thinking about your business and building resiliency. And even the business itself will change over time. So even within the business, change will happen. So being comfortable with change and okay with the ambiguity that comes with it is something that we all need to be to build resiliency. The second is around the team, right? My team is tired of me saying this, but I really believe this African proverb: if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And if you follow me on Twitter, you know that I'm an avid Chelsea football fan. And so I'm going to use Chelsea football team as mine, right? In any football team, you've got the forwards, you've got the midfield, and you've got the defenders, right? Tammy, one of the best forwards in Chelsea football, but you don't want him to play defense. So when you're building your team, you want to think about each role, and you want to think about who is the best placed for that role, right? And so if somebody is great at accounting, right, they shouldn't necessarily be the programmer, right? You want the people who are really great at what they do, and you want them to lean in on that, continue to also sharpen their iron around that. So as you're building the team together, it's very important that you are thinking through how you're positioning people in different roles, right? But building and scaling the people, while it's your number one responsibility as a leader, is not easy at all, right? So I've talked about how you need to put people in the right roles. In the early days of any business, even if you define the roles, it's still about dividing and conquering. So people have to be willing to just sort of block and tackle and figure out what they're going to do. I'm worried about titles in the early days, goals, because that becomes very important to people as well in their own career development. One of the things that I wish I was even more intentional about is culture. And culture is how we do things around here. I actually think at the beginning of Paga, we're intentional somewhat about it, we had a very clear idea of the kind of business we wanted to be. But I think there are things that we could have even done more of, even that time. I really think we could have written it down more clearly, and we could have shared it more widely. And so I think you need to do that. I think you define it. How do we want to do X, Y, Z? We want one-on-ones. How do we do one-on-ones here, right? The way they do it in another company may be different. How do we do it here? We want performance reviews on a quarterly basis. Okay, how do we do that? Just saying that we want to do performance reviews doesn't mean that everybody's going to do the performance reviews the way we do it. So we need to write it down. We need to share it. And in fact, this is one area, like I said, I think that I could have done better in the beginning of Paga, and we're now correcting for, right? In terms of just sort of writing down how we do things and making it clear and training and teaching that into the culture and into the company. Values, right? Define your values. I used to think of values as like, oh, I'm honest, or this. And I'm like, wait a second. Values actually are, what do you value? If Nike had asked me to have this session on a Saturday, trust me, the first thing I would have done is that I've looked up the calendar for Chelsea football and said, is Chelsea playing? If Chelsea's playing, at that time, I won't be able to do it. I'll just make up some excuse because I value Chelsea. I love you guys all, but I value watching my Chelsea and I value my time. So that's a value that I hold personally, right? It's the same for a company. As a team, you collectively have certain values, and initially you probably just define it without really knowing, but over time you live certain values and then you can reflect back and change them. And so this could change over time. And I think that's part of the flexibility. At Paga 2 years ago, we actually reviewed our values and we took one of them out. And people were actually quite, there's some people were like, wow, why are we taking that one out? Because what we took out was care for community. It's not that we don't care for the community. Actually, we do. We really do. And we do a lot of things around the community. But we actually said to ourselves, is this a value that we promote at Paga? Have we ever met anyone at Paga who got promoted or who was rated because of their care for community? And the answer is no. We're just being honest. And so we took it out because that's not a value. But all the other things that we have as our values, collaboration, ownership, results-oriented, innovation, integrity, these are things that we actually do promote for. And so it has to be things that you actually do and live as well. And then last but not the least is climate. This is actually one piece that is rarely talked about, but I think it's probably the most important determinant of a resilient business. And climate is, how does it feel to work here? And similar to the weather, it changes, right? I mean, it's beautiful, it's sunny right now where I am in San Francisco. Thanks for virtual background. But it could become rainy, right? So that changes. So climate is, how does it feel to work here, which is different from culture. Culture is, how do we do things here, right? So climate is one of the top determinants for success. Each team within a company has its own climate, right? Or subclimates. And the biggest influencer of that is the leader of that team, right? And so it's important to pay attention to the climate and really be conscious about how it feels to work here and to measure it as well. Now, as I said before, some people may be fortunate that you don't need to raise capital. But for a lot of us, we do need to raise capital for our businesses, particularly if you're building a business that you want to scale significantly. And I really want to encourage you to think about your investors as partners on that long journey that you're going on. The investors are bringing money, they're bringing their knowledge and their networks, right, to help you achieve the change that you're seeking to achieve, right? So you need to think about it from that perspective, right? Do your diligence on them. It's like a marriage, right? It's a long-term relationship with a portfolio company, right? What are they like on the board? In good times, what are they like? In bad times, what are they like, right? Are they going to drop you and go, right? I once had a situation where someone was trying to figure out a particular investor with me, and I didn't know what to say about that investor or not. And then they finally told me, oh, the person dropped them dead. I'm like, oh my God, they did the same thing to me once, right? So it turns out that that's what that investor does, right? Today, I've had at least 2 other people come and diligence that investor from me. And I'm like, look, I wouldn't go with them because this is what they do. So this stuff matters, right? And that's something that you have to sort of keep in mind. Do your diligence on them. How do people help around the board? Speak to other entrepreneurs. It's a two-way street, and it's important that both sides are keeping their sides of that bargain. Investors are investing on the team, not just you, the entrepreneur, but also the rest of the team. So make sure the rest of the team is exposed to investors, because they need to also understand the capabilities of the people that you've brought around to lead the ship, and actually to drive the business forward. This is probably the biggest one for me, especially as an angel investor, right? The way you treat me when I invest $5,000 in you is the way you're going to treat me when I invest $1 million. I really believe that. There's no difference. So if you treat people well, right? And an example I have in my experience, one of my former bosses was one of my first checks into Paga, right? And in fairness, he wrote what I would consider a small check, even for him, right? But I've treated him well over the last 11 plus years, and he has led me to significant investors, right? And just imagine, A, if I did not do good work for him when I worked for him. B, he wouldn't have even invested in the first place. B, if I had not treated him well, right? There's no way he would have gone out of his way to introduce me to all these people, right? And so I really believe in treating your investors well, and good things will happen to you. But also lean on your investors, right? Especially like in this kind of a time where, this crisis, I've had at least 2 formal board meetings in this last 3 weeks. And I've had several calls with my board members and investors outside of that, right? Count on them, right? Depend on them to be partners, to help you brainstorm, to help you navigate in terms of how you're thinking about the business. The more you do that with them, actually, the more engaged they will be in your success as well. This is a big one, especially for those techies out there, but it's true for any business. Product market fit. And Mark Andreessen at Andreessen Horowitz, or A16, is really known for speaking about this, right? It really means being in a good market with a product that can satisfy the market. So let's be clear here what the market is. The market is who are the people demanding your product, right? And so that's what we're defining as a market. And then you have a product that actually satisfies that market demand. So finding product market fit is being in a good market that can scale with a product that satisfies the demand, right? So how do you know you have it? I think it's super critical to find that the market is really critical, rather than setting up a business that is looking for a market. It's better to solve problems that exist. Remember, you're seeking to make change happen. So seeking to make change happen from what already exists, right? And where there's a demand, right? I think the market is as important as the team. There's a debate about this. Mark would argue that the market is the most important thing. I think, but I do take his point that if you have a good market and a lousy team, you'll probably still do fine, right? If you have a bad market and a great team, you're not going to do well, right? Like, so I do take that point, but I do think the team is extremely important, and you have to be very intentional about the people you bring onto your team, how you lead the team, and how you manage the team. But if there's a need for a product or a solution that you have, right, the market will adopt it, right? So if that's the definition of a good market, right, that there's a need and the market will, it's much easier for you to scale a business where the market already has demand for your offering. Now, what you may find when you start a business is that there's demand and you're in a good market, but maybe some things do not allow you to actually go after it the way you want to go after it, right? So you can keep your your strategy clear, but you may have to go in different ways and different tactics to get to where you want to go. So that's fine. But while it's not impossible to create a new market, it's very difficult. And I think I'd really encourage people not to do that. It's very rare to build a business where there was not a demand already and do very well at it. It's not impossible. It happens. For those techies out there, you know VMware. They eventually did it, but it took a lot of years for VMware to build the idea that you could have one computing device and have multiple instances of it on the device, and that is now what has allowed for cloud computing for many years later, right? At the core of cloud computing. So that's key. So the proof is really in the pudding when it comes to product market fit. And like I said before, you might need to iterate, right? Changing the product, changing your market focus on the journey that you're going for you to really get there. But product market fit is very important, and I think it's a key part that if you can get that, and the sooner you get it, the better, the more resilient your business will be in the long term. And I actually think one of the mistakes that people make in Nigeria is you try to do too many things at the beginning of your business. I think it's so important to stay focused and focus on one or two things, get them really well. As you do those well, you get the privilege, and I really think it's a privilege, to be able to go on and do other things, right? But if you haven't got that original core right, then you're not able to really do that. And figuring out what that core is also really interesting journey to go through. And then last item I have in terms of the 5 points is really about aligning your team to objectives. Look, your strategy and your execution tactics may change over time. So if I take Paga as an example, we have a massive transformative purpose. So we want to make it simple for 1 billion people to access and use money, right? That is a big purpose. And I pray that, that I'm alive to see that happen, right? But we're on a journey to get there. Now, each year, each quarter, our strategy and our tactics change, right? We actually plan our strategy in an 18-month cycle. And then on a quarterly basis, we align our tactics and objectives towards the strategy, right? Looking at what's on hand. So in the early days of a business, I say get everybody in a room. If there's 20 employees, all 20 of us will be in this room. We'll talk about what the strategy, we'll define it together. You as the entrepreneur, I think you have to be very careful not to come in with all the ideas, not to come in with this is how it's going to be, right? I think the more you do that, the less people will engage, right? I think you come in with a vision, you come in with a perspective, right? But you let the team build that strategy and execution tactic and let their creativity come out. The more you do that, actually, the more resilient your business is, right? Because your business is now not just dependent on your energy, but on the energy of others. And those people are bought in, right? Because they're seeing their ideas come to life, and they're also getting fulfillment and growing their careers, and you're jointly going on this journey together, right? But document the outcomes and share it with people so that everybody can go back and reflect on it, and everybody knows what we discussed, what we agreed upon. Now, as your business grows, you need to bring greater structure. And this is actually one of the things that I think was really tough for me initially, right? Because we got everybody in a room, and now all of a sudden, we can't get everybody in a room. There are too many people. And in fact, some of the people who were in the room cannot be in the room anymore, right? So it means that we have to communicate, right? And continuously do that. And so you have to now start thinking about how do you build structures as your business grows to help with that. Now, some of the tools that we use today, I wouldn't recommend you use it in the early days. And even in Paga, we are incubating some businesses in Paga today. And those businesses we're incubating do not use these tools, right? Because they are startups, right? They are at the early days of their existence. So they do not use these tools, but the rest of us do, right? Maybe there are a couple of places that they do. So for example, objectives and key results. There's a lot of material out there on objectives and key results. There's a gentleman named Felipe Castro who has written a lot on OKRs. So if you just search Castro and OKRs, you'll find good material from him. I recommend that for larger businesses. I would not use it as a startup. As a very early startup, I would not use it. weekly leadership check-in. So every Monday, I have a check-in with all my direct reports. On Fridays, we all write our, a quick note to each other, and then we come into that meeting and we focus on sort of what are the key things. So it just keeps us aligned. And then quarterly, we review the business together. We do our KPIs and review. Now it's 2 days. It used to be 4 hours at some point, right? Before that, 2 hours. As the business grows, it just expands. And so it's 2 days, and we really dive in on each of the business areas and really understand that. Now with the team, those first items are all really with the core leadership team and extended leadership team at Paga. With the team, we also have to keep them updated. So every leader has their own weekly or monthly meetings with their team, where they have to share the strategies of the company and alignment as well, right? OKRs, the teams build the OKRs together to make sure we're aligned and we know what we're doing. But I also then email the team on a monthly basis. And then I have this Ask Tyler session where we get on a Zoom call and people can ask me questions. And you can ask them anonymously if you want, or you can ask with your name. That's fine. All questions welcome, and we are open to that, right? And we do then quarterly town halls as well with the leadership and everybody. So again, it's just tools that allow for more communication, and all with the goal of aligning the team, right? So these are the tools that I have been using. The goal ultimately is for everyone to know where we're headed, why their job matters, and how their job fits in to the company goals, right? And I think when you create that alignment, it builds greater resilience within and for your business in the long term, right? So just to recap on the 5 areas, the first one is really make change happen. And if you're not doing that, then stop. Team, right? You're going to be as good as your team, and really spending the energy on people and making sure you have the right people processes, the right people operations. How do you mentor? How do you grow and scale your people? Allowing them to fly in the organization is really critical. Investors as partners on that journey and how you treat them, really critical. Same thing goes for your business partners. How you treat your business partners is so important, right? And hold your word there, right, in all you do. Finding product market fit, the faster your business finds that, the more resiliency you build into the business, right? And as you find it in one area and you execute well in one area, it gives you the privilege to do other things. So don't be as quick to spread your wings into too many things. Aligning your team from day one, everybody, transparency, knowing what we're doing, why we're doing it, where we're going, right? And then continually recapping it. So these are the 5 key areas that I think, in my experience, are the things that really you need to do to really build a long-term business. As I say to my team, and I said to them this morning, my personal goal is to build a business that lasts 200 years. And so, if Coca-Cola can be around 180 plus years. And by the way, on the idea of, if Coca be around for 180 plus years, why can't Paga be around 200 years from now in some fashion or the other, right? And this is really interesting on Coca-Cola. Today, Coca-Cola probably has 100 plus products, right? And they've been around 180 plus years. But do you know that only until I think 1964 or the 60s sometime, they only had one product, Coca-Cola, right? So just think about that for a minute. Until 1960s, they only had one product, Coca-Cola, right? Now they have hundreds of products. They have the privilege to do that, but they actually dug deep and stayed with just one product till that time. And it's not because there were not ideas, right? In fact, one of my business acquaintances I now know, his grandfather was invited by Coke to become a bottler, and his grandfather was making a Zobo drink. So they've seen Zobo, right? They said, leave that Zobo, come and do Coke, right? So it's not like there were not ideas. They actually just stayed with one thing, and I think that has served them well, arguably. So before I open up to questions, I'll take your questions. I just want to really quickly talk about, because we're in, just crazy period, once in a generation, once in a lifetime, I hope, in terms of what's going on with COVID-19. And it's really unprecedented times. And I just want to share a little bit about my perspective on how I've handled it with my team. And really, I think it ultimately calls for transparency, decisiveness, and leadership, right? I think that's the way you navigate through this kind of crisis. It's my second time going through a crisis, but nothing as big as this before. For me, the first thing was that I needed to put aside all my own personal views and make sure that whatever decisions we make as a team is as a leadership team. So I gathered my direct reports and a few of their reports, and we sat together and talked about this pandemic, and we talked about what it means both from a health perspective and from a business perspective. And we basically said, look, what do we need to do, and when should we act, and how should we act? Now you have to remember, we actually are a company now that have teams in Nigeria, Ethiopia, UK, and Mexico. So we had to think about it from a global perspective, like sort of from all these countries, what do we do, right? So we decided on a course of action that was very much reflected our own shared values, right, and our objectives as a business. So the first for us, most important, was the safety of our people and our customers, right, particularly our agents. And so what do we do for them? And so we made a decision immediately to work from home. So I think 2 weeks before the Nigerian government decided on this lockdown, we made that decision. And we spent a day, everybody just, making sure that we're going all out to figure out that everybody on every team can work from home and that they have the tools. Do they have internet? Do they have light? Right? We actually did a poll to find out in our company how many people have inverters, how many people have generators, what type of generator do you have? Is it petrol? Is it diesel? Right? What kind of internet do you have? How many dongles or what access do you have? And then decided actually that, okay, we're going to actually give some more money we're already giving our team airtime for data. And then the call center team, because they're going to be doing more, we give them extra, right? So made all these decisions around what we do, how do we help our people, and then we announced it to the team and got everybody going. But even that extra day we took, we immediately made sure that anybody on our team who had a pre-existing condition immediately started working from home while we were figuring this out. And so for us, that's like doing our part to flatten the curve. We sending a lot of messages out to our ecosystem with links to the correct information, because there's a lot of disinformation going around. It was just wrong. And then we went into our own business continuity, right? Can a call center operate? How do we make sure that customers can continue to transact during this time, et cetera? And those are things that we did. And I think in these times of crisis, I think it's so important to communicate with your team and with your investors. I think I've had now 2 or 3 town halls with the team. I've sent emails to the team and been very transparent about the issues I foresee, right? And that we as a team say, these are the issues we're facing. And why I think, right, we can make it through it, right? And why I think, and what I think we need to do, right? And all those things are things that a group of us came together to figure out, not just Tyler sitting on its own. So again, bringing everybody together, really important as you do this. And then as we are communicating to the team, we're also communicating to our investors and having conversations with them as well, right? To make sure that they were aware with what was going on, right? One of the things that I was really proud of that we did, and we had already been setting up to do this because we have teams in multiple parts of, in different countries, and in Nigeria, we have 5 offices in Nigeria. So we want to make sure that we have one Paga everywhere. And so we actually had built a culture team called the Stay Orange team, right? And that Stay Orange team is the team that is leading our COVID-19 response, right? And so they're the team that is checking in on everybody, making sure people are fine, getting feedback, bringing that back to the leadership, right? And so people can be more open and have a one-on-one conversation, right? We showed the team we're very transparent on the numbers, our forecast, the likely scenarios that we did, right? Now, nearly 4 weeks in, we did an update to the team. Here's what we thought will happen, or here's what we thought will happen, here's what's happening, right? So, the numbers are going down because our agent network is shut down, but here's how we thought it would go, here's how it's actually going, right? And just being very open with people then allows everybody to be part of this, that we're in this thing together, right? And then this are the things that we're doing to address it. With the board and investors, we've had 2 formal board meetings and been sending them regular updates as well as on WhatsApp, right? Just chatting with everybody, making sure that everybody's in the loop. There are no surprises to anybody, right? And I think this really helps. Now, look, ultimately, we all hope this lockdown ends soon. We hope that we're all able to, save as many lives as possible and figure this out together as a world, right? As a global problem. But in these moments, I think businesses need to really think about how they, it's where resiliency actually comes through. And you need to innovate and think about how do you look for new opportunities that you may have not prioritized before, but that will come out of where the world is going. So at this point, I would encourage people to be thinking further ahead and saying, where is the world going, right? Directionally, and how is my business, how does my business need to change, right? To go in that direction, right? And so I would really encourage people to step back and think about that if you're in a business, whether you're an entrepreneur or not, and really thinking about sort of how do you come out of this period and where do you go next, right? So I think that's what I wanted to share. I'm happy to take any questions either about anything I've said or any topic that may be on your mind.
Thank you so much, Tayo. Very insightful session. We do have a couple of questions actually. And
hi, Danica, can you hear me?
I think your sound went out.
Yeah, okay, good. I lost her.
Okay, Nika, your sound is still out, but while you're sort of getting us sorted, maybe I can unmute some of the people who have questions so they can ask their questions.
Right.
So I'm just going to unmute. Give me 1 second. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name, Oviosu. I've just unmuted you so you can introduce yourself and ask a question.
Hi, that's actually a good effort. My name is Ailabong Oviosu, and Tayo, my question's for you. Hi. So it's actually a 2-part. I was really interested to hear about you talking about writing down your values. I think that's super important in any organization. So what I want to understand from your experience and from what you've seen, how do you then create a system for hiring according to those values? Because I think every additional person either sort of diminishes that or compounds it in a positive direction. So how do you create a system for hiring according to those values once you've got them? And then the second part, when a person actually then joins the team, how do you validate that they are aligned with the values?
Yeah, good question. And this is, thank you for asking that. It's very important. Look, I think once you're clear on what the values are, through the interview process, and actually this is one of the big lessons that we took away from Google. I mean, from our conversations with the head of people operations at Google, you hire for your company, not for the role. So what does that mean, right? We should be comfortable with the idea that we may hire someone for a role and that not be the right role for the person, right? But they're a great fit for the company. And for you to be a great fit for the company means that you're a great fit on the values of the company, right? And so in your interview process, you want to specifically ask questions that will help you understand if this person shares your values or demonstrates your values. And so you have to be thoughtful about what sets of questions you're asking, and actually do the work to potentially build a bank of questions for each thing that you're looking for, right? LinkedIn has a lot of good questions and content that they have publicized about what they do internally, and I actually use that. And so before I go into an interview, and actually now at Paga, we also have our own list of questions that we leverage the LinkedIn one. We literally like say, okay, for this value, here is sets of questions. We don't tell you which one to ask. You, the interviewer, can pick whichever one, but there are a set of them. And I tend to go in and ask similar questions. It's not the same across people I'm interviewing, so I can properly compare in my own mind, right? So that's the first step. In the interview process, you have to interview for values, and I suggest you hire for the company, not for the role, because you might get the role wrong. Now, when people are in the company, your values should be things that you promote. Literally, not when I say promote, I don't mean like, oh, we put on a wall. I mean promote, like literally, like, oh, this person has been taking ownership, and so we're going to give them a promotion. Like that's what I mean when I use the word promote, right? Like it's like anyone who's getting promoted in the business must be someone who everybody will say, yeah, this person is really, they're very innovative, results oriented, right? They have strong integrity, is not even questionable. Everything that are your values, they have to demonstrate. They collaborate with people, right? And you also have to fire. If people are not living up to your values, you have to fire them and let them go, right? Like, because they're not living up to your values, right? If they're not living up to your values, you query them, right? You're not living up to this value that we have. That is how it becomes ingrained, right? If collaboration is a value and someone just doesn't collaborate with anyone, things get queried, and that's a path to you probably have to leave. And so ultimately, you build an environment where people will self-select. If people get in that should not have gotten in, they'll realize they're in the wrong place for themselves, and either they leave or you end up exiting them. I hope that helps.
Understood. Thanks.
Great. Thanks for the answer. Really helpful. So I've unmuted, and again, apologies if I mispronounce your name, Asta. So you can go ahead, introduce yourself, your company, your role, and then ask your question.
I can't hear. Is someone speaking?
Sorry, Asta. I've unmuted you. Do you want to go ahead and ask your question? Or maybe I can just read it out. Okay, so the question seems like you're muting and unmuting. Last question I read. Okay, so I read it. The question says, how did you manage the transition from a startup to a scale-up? And how did some of the veterans in the team transition to having more structure and being less involved in the strategy process?
It's a good question. I think, I still think of us as a startup, but a lot of people I accept don't think of us that way anymore. With 500 people, it's hard to say a startup. So, I mean, look, it just happens, to be honest. I don't know that there was a preparation that we did in some ways, and becomes a bit of a rude awakening. And I think it's actually toughest for those who were in the room before and then not in the room as you become, as you sort of go. And in some cases, actually had to have one-on-one conversations, right? To help those people understand that it's not that they're not valued, or that their voice is not valued, but their voice is now going to have to come in a different way, right? And it was also then important that, when we define, so every year we have our leadership upside. And I said before, we define our strategy in every 18 months. But when we come out of that, we come out with a perspective of what the strategy is. But you know what? We actually give ourselves a little bit of time to go back to our teams and share and get feedback and input before we say this is the final product, right? And that process, I think, is very important because you want the people who are not at that strategy offsite to react to it. And you want them to add their own opinions and their own perspectives to it, and then let it all come back and bubble up again, because that's how everybody owns it as a shared experience. And so you just have to keep trying at it. It's not easy, but you have to be, the more conscious you are of how you bring and carry people along, the better you'll be at it.
Cool. Thanks for that answer. I'm going to ask this question myself because it's really specific. And it comes from Ben Taiwo. And he says, I'm curious to know how the call center works now during the lockdown. Does the team work from home and manage that?
Yeah, our team actually is working from home. We were able to figure out, all the tools that they need to use from home. In fact, we were able to figure out taking calls from home and routing those calls that come into our office in Yaba and routing them back through the internet to someone's laptop at home. But even though we figured that out, we've told our customers to reach us through email instead, just because reliability of internet, etc. So yeah, it's actually been an interesting process to see. So we're focusing more on email, social media, and we have previously done the work to link all of this into one call center management application through any channel that you reach us. So I think the process is working well so far. And we then moved, what we did different for the call center is we used to have 2 shifts. Now we have 3 shifts. And that way, because we're 24/7, because now you don't have to go far from your bed or you could be on your bed and actually be responding to stuff. But we now have 3 shifts. So I thought it was interesting last night. I was going to bed at about 11. I was signing out from my desk and going to bed, and I saw a tweet from one of our call center colleagues who said that she was ending her shift. I was like, okay, I guess we're all ending our shift. Yeah.
Yeah, great. Thanks for that answer. So I've given Antoinette the ability to speak. So if you can unmute yourself, introduce yourself, and then ask your question.
Hi, can anyone hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thanks, Sayo. Hi, my name is Antoinette Dodo. I wanted to ask, what are some of the non-negotiable commitments that you've had to make personally and professionally thus far?
Well, can you expand on that? When you say non-negotiable commitment, what do you mean?
So for instance, they're just things that, can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you now.
Okay, things that are just, not going to be negotiable. Things that you've seen that if I negotiate too much on this, then the 200-year company vision won't come into fruition, whether it's personally or professionally. Yeah.
Got it. So thank you for that, Antoinette, by the way. Like I said, look, the vision for me is that we build a business that is around 200+ years from now. I have no plan to be alive then. So really, for me, it's about how do we today build a business where we have process, we have structure, and we build something that doesn't depend on any one person. And we continue to work on that, right? That's a never ending, you just continue to work on that. So that's the first step, right? Making sure that we have the right climate, the right processes and structures in place, and that people are bought into what we're doing and you're able to build for the direction, right? So that's the part that we can control today. The second part for me, when I think about commitments and sort of what you're talking about, is look, ultimately we're either going to list this business or we're going to sell this business to someone. And, I can't think about that today because it's still many years ahead of me. But I know that if it's to sell the business to someone, I would be very, something that would be non-negotiable for me and how I think about it is the culture fit, right? And because I used to be in acquisitions at Cisco before I came back to Nigeria. And I know that if the two cultures clash, it's just not going to work. So that culture fit with whoever it is will have to be strong. And so those are the kinds of things. And I think that's also, true for how I look at investors, and how I think about even, people I bring onto the leadership teams, and just sort of the softer things of how we engage, how we interact. I don't think everybody has to look alike or do the same kinds of things, right? But there has to be certain shared values that are important as you sort of decide on different aspects of the business as it goes forward.
Great.
I hope that answered your question. Yeah.
Does it?
Yes, thank you. Perfectly. Thank you.
If it doesn't, Antoinette knows where to find me.
I didn't want to unmute. I was like, you can ask him that question during the.
Yeah, we work together. I don't mind that. All right. That's good.
Okay, so I'm going to ask this question that we have from Akabi, and it says you stressed the importance of alignment with your investors. So it's a question around: have you ever disengaged from an investor? Now, I'm not sure if that's prior to investment or after investment, but have you disengaged from an investor, and then how did you go about that?
What does disengaged mean, I guess, is the question, right? Is disengaged that, because someone has put their money in, the only way you can get them to take the money out is they either sell their shares or something, right? And you can't force anybody to do that. So no, I've never, gone down that path, or trying, need to. I think alignment is really important with your investors. I think it's important to always think of the relationship with them as a long-term relationship. I do think investors have a part to play, but they also have to do their part in keeping their word and stuff like that. And I've been very fortunate that the vast majority of my investors have been in the ilk of people who keep their word, and I'm very proud of them, and they're investors who I would say very confidently to anyone. Yesterday, I tweeted about the Alethea IDF Fund, which has raised, I think, about $75 million to invest in female-led businesses across Africa. And I'm super excited about that because they're one of my best investors. And so I'm going to be a big promoter for anyone who's been a really great investor for us. And I think, the people who have not been or who have not kept to their word, which are very, very few, I'm not going to be out there talking about them publicly, but certainly if any of my friends ask me about them, I'm not going to give a positive review either, right? But I've been very fortunate. I've not had investor issues. In fact, in 11 years of this business, my board has only voted once on anything that was contentious. Like, we only had one contentious vote, right? We've debated a lot of things. We haven't agreed on a lot of things, but we've only ever had one contentious vote. And I think that ultimately is a testament to the shared vision that we have, the shared values, and our ability to work together towards solving whatever problems come our way.
Great. No, thanks for that answer. So I'm going to ask this question myself, and it comes from Toby Joseph. And the question is, I'm still sticking on the theme of investors. If you have a product that you believe has product market fit and you're trying to raise capital, do you have any advice for someone trying to raise capital in these uncertain times?
Yeah, so I'm going to assume that this is a new company, and I'll just sort of make one sort of edit, so to speak, of what you're saying. You don't need to believe that something has product market fit. Product market fit is really proof is in the pudding. Is somebody buying that product, right? Is there a demand for it, and are they buying it? It shows when you achieve it. So I think that's, at the very beginning, when you have an idea, you don't know if you have product market fit. So I would not say at the very beginning when I have an idea, oh, I have product market fit. No, I don't know, right? For the first 3 years of Paga, I did not know if I had product market fit because I had not launched a product, right? I thought I did. I thought I had a good sense that there's a market demand. I tested it, but I couldn't say I had product market fit. And even today, there's some of our products where we have product market fit in some places where I don't think we have it yet, or we haven't proven it yet that we have it. So I think you always have to be honest with yourself about that. But secondly, in terms of raising money now, this is a really tough time for any startup. If you're at the very beginning seed stage to raise capital, I do think this is the best time to start a business. To be honest, I think downturns. I started Paga just after, in the midst of a downturn. I think downturns are a good time to start businesses, and there's a longer conversation around that. But it's also a tough time to raise capital. So, I think nobody is investing in seed Series A probably till call it, June, August, right? And so I think you just have to think about that very carefully. But people will invest in things. So I still, on my angel side of things, I still see, people looking at doing deals. But what you have to think about then is if you're already running the business and you already have raised some capital, you have to now think about your runway, right? And say, okay, this is about cash preservation. How do I remain lean enough that I'm able to, while I'm remaining lean, I'm able to still invest and extend my runway? And do I need to do something in between now and my next sort of key milestone of raising capital, right? Again, these are the kinds of things that are so specific for companies. It's hard to talk about it generally, but I'll give you an example. I was advising some entrepreneurs yesterday, and by their original plan, they wanted to raise their Series A in, I think in September, October, okay? But now what they've immediately done is say, hey, look, we have to stay lean, and this money we already have. They raised money, I think, in January. This money we already have, we need to extend it through next year. And they've actually created a plan that now extends that through next year, call it about February, March, right? Okay, but even though we've done that already, let's go out and try and raise a bridge round of some additional capital, smaller than we were thinking of doing. So not a Series A, smaller than we were originally thinking of doing. Let's go to a smaller subset of people who already know us so that we get even more buffer, right? So that in August, when we go out and start raising the Series A, it may take us longer, but we have enough of a buffer, right? I think you now have to start thinking about those kinds of things. If you have lines of credit, for any of you who have businesses that have lines of credit, take all the money out of the line of credit. Frankly, the cost of the debt that you'll be paying to the banks later on pales in comparison to the opportunity to let your business survive, if that's what helps your business survive, right? If you have a loan out with the bank, go and renegotiate your payment terms, do everything you have to do. Go back to your vendors, renegotiate with them, do everything you have to do to extend your runway. And it's all about cash flow, right? So I think this is a very, very specific company to company, but you have to think about how do you invest, extend your runway, and manage things as you go. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Okay, cool.
my network was bad, so I dropped out for a bit. I think for time, we have a lot of questions. So I'll ask you to round up with just 3 thoughts to leave people with. But before I'll give you some time to think and just give instructions. So we're out of time, and so we can't take any more questions. There's still a ton of questions in the Q&A. If you still have any questions, you can reach Tayo on through his email, which I believe was at the top of the presentation, and I guess he'll try his best to answer. So I'll hand over to you to give us three thoughts to go with.
Yeah, Darren, thank you very much. And first of all, thank you very much, everyone, for attending. And I really appreciate it. And thanks for the great questions. I know I couldn't answer all of them, so please feel free. You can email me at tayo@paga.com, or you can catch me on Twitter at Oviosu. Just mention this session. I'll be happy to respond to your questions. Please forgive me if it's a bit delayed, but I will respond. Look, three thoughts I'll just leave you with. I think if you are, you can be entrepreneurial within a business or, starting a business on your own. I think the idea of entrepreneurship and the idea of, going after an opportunity without regard for the resources you control is super exciting. And I think it's awesome to do. I think first thought is to go on people. And so that's really about the team. The second thought is that, this is really a long game, and you should go in for the long haul. Be intentional about how you think about things and what you do. But the third and last thing I would say is have a bias for action. So even though you're intentional, always have a bias for action. It's better to act and fail and get up and go again than to keep planning and planning and planning and planning and planning and never act, right? So just go for it, break down the walls, have a bias for action, and make progress, right? And then just keep at it. And most of our lives are spent at work. So, make sure that you build the environment that you love to be in for most of the day. So I think that's all I'll say. And thank you again, everyone, for being here. Really appreciate it.
So I wouldn't add a single word to that. Thank you, Tayo.
All right, Darren. Thanks very much. Take care, everyone. Cheers.
Stay safe.
And please stay safe. Yep. Cheers.